Now we'll start with the 61 question. This is a continuation of the static quiz compilation of October. Okay. 60° to 65° latitudes on both the hemispheres have a low pressure belt instead of the high pressure. The low pressure areas are permanent over the oceans rather than on land. तो इसमें करेक्ट क्या है? इसमें से पहला स्टेटमेंट सही है. 60 to 65° latitude in both the hemisphere have a low pressure belt instead of the high pressure. This is right. The low pressure areas are permanent over the oceans rather than on the land. The subpolar low pressure belt extends between 45° north and the Arctic Circle, 6630 north in the northern hemisphere, and between the 45° south and the Antarctic Circle, 66° south in the southern hemisphere. They are known as the north subpolar low and the south subpolar low pressure belt, respectively. The wind coming from the subtropical and the polar high belt coverage here to produce the cyclonic storms or the low pressure conditions. A low pressure area is a region where the atmospheric pressure is lower than that of a surrounding area. A low pressure system develops when the warm and the moist air rises from the Earth's surface and the air in the surrounding air rushes in to fill the empty space created by this rising air, thus forming a heavy inflow of the wind. Consider the following statement. Wind patterns are clockwise in the southern hemisphere and the anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere. The direction of the wind pattern in the northern and south hemisphere are governed by the Coriolis effect. तो इसमें सही क्या है? इसमें दूसरा स्टेटमेंट सही है. Direction of the wind pattern in the northern southern hemisphere are governed by the Coriolis effect. ये बिल्कुल सही है, बट जो पहला स्टेटमेंट है वो गलत है कि wind patterns are clockwise in the southern hemisphere and they are anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere. ये गलत है. The direction of the prevailing winds are largely determined by the Coriolis effect. In the northern hemisphere, the wind deflects clockwise, while in the southern hemisphere, wind deflects anti-clockwise. अब देखो दूसरा क्वेश्चन क्या है. Consider the following statement. The air pressure is highest at the sea level and decreases with height. The low pressure systems are associated characterized by the dry and the settled weather. The air always moves from the high pressure area to the low pressure area. Which of the following is correct? That is the first and the third. The air pressure is highest at the sea level and decreases with the weight. The air always moves from the high pressure area to the low pressure area. Both are right. But the second statement is wrong. The low pressure system are especially characterized by the dry and the settled weather. This is wrong. Air pressure is defined as the pressure which is exerted by the weight of the air on the Earth's surface. As we go up the layers of the atmosphere, the pressure falls rapidly. In the areas where the temperature is high, the air gets heated and rises, and this creates a low pressure area. The low pressure is associated with the cloudy skies and the wet weather. In the areas having the lower temperature, the air is cold. It is therefore heavy. The heavy air sinks and creates a high pressure area. The high pressure is associated with the clear and the sunny skies. The air always moves from the high pressure area to the low pressure area. Air closer to the Earth's surface is heavier because of the gravitational forces acting on the air. Atmospheric pressure is caused by the weight of the atmosphere, which is pushing down on itself and on the surface below it. Atmospheric pressure decreases with the height above the surface of a planet because there is less total mass in the atmosphere above a reference point as the height of the reference point increases, and this is explained by the heaviness of the air closer to the Earth. Air is heaviest at the sea level because the air molecules are pressed together due to gravity. Consider following statement regarding Intertropical Convergence Zone (ITCZ). It is a zone of convergence at the thermal equator where the trade winds meet. In this zone, air tends to descend. It is a low pressure belt and migrate with the changing position of the thermal equator. इसमें करेक्ट कौन सा है, पहला और तीसरा. The ITCZ is a zone of convergence at the thermal equator where the trade winds meet. This is right. Low pressure belt migrate with the changing position of the thermal equator is also right. In this zone, the air tends to descend. This is wrong. The ITCZ is a zone of convergence at the thermal equator where the trade winds meet, and it is a zone where the air tends to ascend. It is a low pressure belt and migrate with the changing position of the thermal equator. The thermal equator receives the most intense heat from the sun. Around 20th June each year, the sun is overhead at the 23.5° north, the Tropic of Cancer, and around 20th December, the sun is overhead at the 23.5° south, the Tropic of Capricorn. The movement of the thermal equator shifts the belt of the planetary winds and the pressure system to the north and to the south annually. Almost all the weather phenomena like the rainfall, fog, and hailstorm occur in this layer of the atmosphere. That is troposphere. Troposphere is the most important layer of the atmosphere for the human beings. The air we breathe exists here. Almost all the weather phenomena like rainfall, fog, and hailstorm occur in this layer. Consider the following statement. For the formation of the frost, dew point should be at or above the freezing point, and for the formation of the dew point should be below the freezing point. इसमें सही क्या है? दोनों ही गलत है. When the moisture is deposited in the form of the water droplets on the cooler surface of the solid objects, it is known as the dew. Mm, It is known as the dew, and the ideal condition for the formation are clear sky, calm air, high relative humidity, and the cold and long nights. For the formation of the dew, it is necessary that the dew point is above the freezing point. Frost forms on the cold surfaces when the condensation takes place below the freezing point, that is, the dew point is at or below the freezing point. The excess moisture is deposited in the form of the minute ice crystals instead of the water droplets. Consider the following statement. The cold air holds less water vapor than the warm air. The dense fogs in the early morning occur due to the mechanism of temperature inversion. The transformation of the water vapor directly into water is called sublimation. तो इसमें सही क्या है? The first and the second. The cold air holds the less water vapor than the warm air. This is right. The dense fogs in the early morning occur due to mechanism of temperature inversion. Normally, the temperature decreases with the increase in the elevation. It is called the normal lapse rate. At times, the situation is reversed and the normal lapse rate is inverted. It is called inversion of temperature. The surface inversion promotes stability in the lower layers of the atmosphere. The smoke and the dust particle get collected beneath the inversion layer and spread horizontally to fill the lower strata of the atmosphere. Dense fogs in the mornings are common occurrences, especially during winter season. This inversion commonly lasts for few hours until the sun comes up and begins to warm the air. With the change of the air temperature, the capacity to retain the moisture increases or decreases. The warm air can hold more water vapor than the cold air. Sublimation is a conversion between the solid and the gaseous phases of the matter with no intermediate liquid stage. The eastern coast of the continent within the tropics have much heavier rainfall than the west coast, and this is because the trade winds cause the greater precipitation on the eastern coast. The island and the coastal area, 10 to 20 degrees north and south of the equator, especially have a tropical marine climate. The ocean is a main influence in creating the tropical marine climate. The temperature ranges from 25 to 35 degrees Celsius. The trade winds blow all year round. The trade winds are moist as they have passed over the warm seas. Since they are easterlies, they cause greater precipitation on the eastern coast and run dry on the western coast and interior. Consider the following statement. As a general rule, in the peninsular India, the rainfall increases from the coast to the interior parts. The summer monsoon in India moves in the opposite direction in the northeast monsoon. इसमें सही क्या है? दूसरा statement. The summer monsoon in India moves in the opposite direction of the northeast monsoon. In the peninsular India, the rainfall decreases from the coast to the interior part. The reason is that the interiors are on the rain shadow side. The moisture is soaked up with the movement of the cloud inward as they shower the hilly region of the west coast. The northeast monsoon travels from the northeast to the southwest. The summer monsoon moves in exactly the opposite direction from the southwest to the northeast, and that is why it is called the southwest monsoon. Consider the following statement regarding the cyclone and the anticyclone. The cyclone originate at the area of the low pressure while the anticyclone originate a high pressure area. Both the cyclone and anticyclone are associated with the cloud, rain and thunderstorm. तो इसमें सही क्या है? पहला कि cyclone originate at the area of the low pressure while the anticyclone originate at the high pressure area. A cyclone which is known as the low, as in the area of the low pressure, where the air masses meet and rise. An anticyclone which is known as the high, an area of the high pressure, where the air moves apart and sinks. Cyclone typically indicates the bad weather like the rain and the cloud, whereas the anticyclone indicates the fair weather. The frontal cyclones are most likely to occur in the Mid-latitude regions. The mid-latitude of the frontal cyclones are the large traveling atmospheric cyclones storms up to 2000 km in diameter with the centers of the low atmospheric pressure. The mid-latitude cyclones are the result of the dynamic interaction of the warm tropical and the cold polar air masses at the polar front. This interaction causes the warm air to be cyclonically lifted vertically into the atmosphere where it combines with the colder upper atmosphere air. This process also helped to transport the excess energy from the lower latitude to the higher latitude. What are the consequences of the thin air found at the high altitude region in Ladakh? Frostbite is rarest in this region due to presence of the thin air mass. Heat of the sun is felt much lesser as compared to places in the lower altitude in the region. तो इसमें दोनों ही गलत है. Due to the high altitude, the climate is extremely cold and dry. The air at this altitude is so thin that the heat of the sun can be felt intensely. The area experiences freezing wind and burning hot sunlight. The day temperatures in the summer are just above the 0 degree and the night temperature well below 30 degrees Celsius. It is the freezing cold in the winters when the temperatures may remain below 40 degrees Celsius for most of the time. You will be surprised to know that if you sit in the sun with your feet in the shade, you may suffer from both sunstroke and the frostbite at the same time. The thunderstorms are formed because of the intense convection on the moist hot days. The thunderstorms are caused by the intense convection on the moist hot days. A thunderstorm is a well-grown cumulonimbus cloud producing thunder and lightning. When the cloud extends to height where the sub-zero temperature prevails, hails are formed and they come down as hailstorms. If there is insufficient moisture, a thunderstorm can generate the dust storm. A thunderstorm is characterized by the intense updraft of the rising warm air that causes the cloud to grow bigger and rise to greater height, and that causes a precipitation. Consider the following statement regarding the polar front jet stream. It is a belt of the powerful upper level wind that sit atop the polar front, and these winds are strongest in the tropopause. तो इसमें सही क्या है? इसमें दोनों सही है. The polar front jet stream, also called the polar front jet or the mid-latitude jet stream, a belt of powerful upper-level wind that sit atop the polar front. The winds are strongest in the tropopause, which is the upper boundary of the troposphere, move in generally a westerly direction in the mid-latitude. Consider the following statement regarding the role played by the tropical cyclones on the region and the global climate. They carry the heat energy away from the tropics and transport it towards the temperate latitude. They can often bring the intense rainfall to the drought-prone region. They also act as a earth filter system by cleansing the air of the toxin and the pollutant out of the atmosphere. तो इसमें सही क्या है? इसमें तीनों सही है. The tropical cyclone can relieve the drought condition as they carry moisture-laden winds. In addition to the strong wind and the rain, the tropical cyclones are capable of generating high waves, damaging storm surge and tornadoes. They typically weak the rapidly over and where they are cut off from their primary energy source. For this reason, the coastal regions are particularly vulnerable to damage from a tropical cyclone as compared to inland regions. Heavy rain, however, caused significant flooding inland, and storm surges produce extensive coastal flooding up to 25 miles from the coastline. They also carry heat energy away from the tropics and transport it towards the temperate latitudes because they are the large wind system that absorb the frontal condition of the area they flow in. Finally, due to the high speed they blow in, they also act as a earth filter system by cleansing the air of the toxin and pollutant out of the atmosphere. In a tropical cyclone, as you move from the edges towards the center, air pressure decreases significantly. Tropical cyclone is a rapidly rotating storm system which is characterized by the low pressure center on the earth The pressures recorded at the centers of the tropical cyclones are among the lowest ever observed at the sea level. At the center of a mature tropical cyclone, the air sinks rather than rises. For a sufficiently strong storm, air may sink over a layer deep enough to suppress the cloud formation, thereby creating a clear eye. If the air pressure is high at the center and low at the edges, an anticyclone is formed. Indian cities on the Arabian Sea coastline are the less vulnerable to cyclone compared to the cities on the Bay of Bengal coastline. This is because cyclones originating in the Arabian Sea essentially move away from the Indian mainland. Arabian Sea is more saline and hotter compared to Bay of Bengal, and thus harboring less ideal conditions for the production of cyclones. इसमें सही क्या है पहला? The cyclones originating in the Arabian Sea especially move away from the Indian mainland. Arabian Sea is comparatively less prone to cyclone storms and the Bay of Bengal reasons are temperature. BOB is hotter than Arabian Sea. Hot water temperature is the basic criteria for the development and intensification of the cyclone. Salinity: Arabian Sea has the higher salinity than the BOB. It's easier to heat and simultaneously evaporate water, having lower salinity. Location: the typhoons originating in the Pacific Ocean too influences the cyclones in the BOP and not the case in the Arabian Sea. Movement: according to IMD, cyclones originating in Arabian Sea are believed to move northwest, so they actually move away from the Indian mainland. रितु दी रितु दी ये पंखा बंद कर दो. The bay receives higher rainfall and the constant inflow of the fresh water from the Ganga and Brahmaputra rivers. This means that the bay surface water keeps getting refreshed, making it impossible for the warm water to mix with the cooler water below, making it ideal for a depression. The factors responsible for the origin of the cyclone in the Bay of Bengal region are the presence of the Coriolis force enough to create a cyclonic vortex, a pre-existing weak low-pressure area, the upper divergence above the sea level system. General factors responsible for the origin of the cyclone in the Bay of Bengal region are large sea surface with a temperature higher than 27 degrees Celsius, presence of the Coriolis force enough to create a cyclonic vortex, small variation in the vertical wind speed, a pre-existing weak low-pressure area or the low-level cyclonic circulation, upper divergence above the sea level system. The bomb cyclone recently seen in news is a storm that intensified very rapidly. A bomb cyclone is a storm that intensifies very rapidly. Bomb cyclones from where? From when the air near the Earth's surface rises quickly in the atmosphere, triggering a sudden drop in the barometric pressure at least 24 millibars within the 24 hours. Consider following statement regarding the microgravity. It is a condition in which the people object appear to be weightless, occur when the gravitation force around is zero or when the objects are in a state of free fall. उसमें सही क्या है पहला? It is a condition people object appear to be weightless. है ना? और जब gravity zero हो या objects in the state of free fall ये गलत है. It is a condition in which the people or object appear to be weightless occur when the gravitation force around is weak but not zero, or when the objects are in a state of the free fall as in a satellite. For example, the astronauts, they can move equipment weighing hundreds of pounds with their fingertip due to microgravity. A black hole cannot be seen because of the strong gravity that is pulling all of the light into the black hole center. If a star is orbiting a certain point in the space, the scientists can study the star motion to find out if it is orbiting a black hole. तो उसमें करेक्ट क्या है? दोनों दोनों सही है. Black hole cannot be seen because of strong gravity pulling all of the light into black hole center, and star orbiting a certain point in space. Scientists can study star motion to find out if it is orbiting a black hole. The black hole cannot be seen because of the strong gravity which is pulling all of the light into the black hole center. However, scientists can see the effects of its strong gravity on the star and gases around it. If a star is orbiting a certain point in the space, scientists can study the star's motion to find out if it is orbiting a black hole. The average temperature roughly decreases from the equator towards the pole in the same manner as that of the distribution of solar insolation. An important factor that influences the distribution of temperature is insolation. It is the incoming solar energy intercepted by the Earth. The amount of insolation decreases from the equator towards the pole. Therefore, the temperature decreases in the same manner. Consider the following statement regarding the pulsars. They are non-magnetized rotating neutron stars that contain more mass than that of the Sun. The scientists are studying the pulsars in search for planets beyond the Earth's solar system and major cosmic distance. तो उसमें सही क्या है? दूसरा वाला सही है. They are studying the pulsar in search for planet beyond Earth's solar system and major cosmic distance. This is right. The first one is wrong. The pulsars are highly magnetized rotating neutron stars that emit a beam of electromagnetic radiation. They are spherical, compact objects but contain more mass than that of the Sun. The scientists are using pulsars to study the extreme states of matter, the search for the planet beyond the Earth's solar system and major cosmic distance. Even when Earth gets nearest to the Sun, the effects of this increased solar insolation are not felt on a large scale on the Earth, and this can be due to both 1 and 2 circulation of the ocean currents and redistribution of the heat through the trade winds. Distribution of the land and sea heat transfer by the way of the sea and the land breezes etc. redistribute the increased insolation so that the effects are not felt on a large scale. ठीक है फिर क्या है Consider the following statement regarding the fiscal prudence. Fiscal prudence implies spending excess to create demand in the economy. Fiscal responsibility and budget management 2003 socialized the concept of fiscal prudence. इसमें सही क्या है सब दूसरा सही है ना Fiscal prudence in the simple word is spending within the budget. For any economy to mature, fiscal prudence is critical. If the government continues to spend way more than its revenue, it will either have to print more currency or borrow from the market to meet the shortfall. Printing currency will fuel the inflation and at times hyperinflation. In a bid to avoid this scenario and mandate fiscal prudence, the Government of India passed the FRBM Act in 2003. Objective was to institutionalize the fiscal prudence and reduce the country fiscal deficit in such a manner, gradually move towards balancing the budget. Consider following statement regarding gross value added. It is a measure of total output and income in the economy. It provides a rupee value for the amount of goods and services produced in the economy after adding the cost of input and raw material that have gone into the production of those goods and services. तो इसमें सही क्या है पहला measure of total output and income in the economy. Gross value added is a measure of total output and income in the economy. Provides the rupee value for the amount of the goods and services produced in the economy after deducting the cost of input and raw material that have gone into the production of those goods and services. Also gives sector specific pictures like what is the growth in the area, industry or sector of the economy. Following statement regarding Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation. It is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Reserve Bank of India. Authorized capital of the corporation is 5 crores, which is fully issued and subscribed by the RBI. The management of the corporation vests with its board of directors of which governor is the chairman. इसमें सही क्या है सर पहला सही है wholly owned a subsidiary of the RBI. The authorized capital of corporation is 50 crores, which is fully issued and subscribed by the Reserve Bank of India. The management of the corporation vests with a board of directors of which a deputy governor of the RBI is the chairman. Consider following statement regarding the prompt corrective action of the Reserve Bank of India. It aims to monitor the operation of the weaker banks more closely to encourage them to conserve capital and avoid risk. It imposes certain restriction on dividend distribution and expansion of the branches by the bank that are financially weak. तो इसमें गलत कौन से हैं दोनों ही गलत है The Prompt Corrective Action (PCA) is a framework under which the bank with the weak financial metrics are put under the watch by the RBI. The PCA framework deems banks as risky if they slip below the certain norms on three parameters: capital ratio, asset quality, and profitability. It aims to monitor the operation of the weaker banks more closely to encourage them to conserve capital and avoid risk. PCA framework is about imposing certain restriction on expansion of branches and dividend distribution by banks that are financially weak as reflected in parameters like non-performing asset ratio and return on assets. Consider the following statement regarding classification of the money market. Call money, borrowing or lending in the unsecured fund on the overnight basis. Notice money, borrowing, lending in the unsecured fund from 15 days to 1 year. Term money, borrowing or lending in the unsecured fund for up to 14 days. उसमें सही क्या है? सिर्फ पहला वाला सही है, कॉल मनी, borrowing or lending in the unsecured funds or overnight basis. Call money means borrowing or the lending in the unsecured funds on the overnight basis. Notice money means borrowing or lending in the unsecured funds for the tenor up to and inclusive of the 14 days excluding overnight borrowings or lending. Term money means borrowing or lending in the unsecured fund for the period exceeding 14 days and up to 1 year. Consider the following pair regarding the idea of planning in India. The Visvesvarai plan focused on shifting the labor from industrial sector to agriculture sector. The Gandhian plan emphasized on cottage and village level industry. Bombay plan emphasized on the development of essential consumer good industries in India. तो उसमें दूसरा और तीसरा सही है. गांधीयन प्लान, बॉम्बे प्लान are right. In the 1934, Sir M. Visvesvarai had published a book titled Planned Economy in India, in which he presented a constructive draft of the development of India in the next 10 years. His core idea was to lay out a plan to shift the labor from agriculture to industry and double up the national income in the 10 years. In the light of the basic principle of the Gandhian economics, S.N. Agrawal authored the Gandhian Plan in 1944, in which he put emphasis on expansion of small unit production agriculture. Fundamental feature was decentralization of economic structure with a self-contained village and cottage industry. The Bombay Plan emphasized the importance of basic industry development of consumption good industry in the early years of the plan. A statement regarding participatory notes. These are among the group of investments considered to be the offshore derivative investment. The investor in the P notes owns the underlying Indian security but does not enjoy any voting right in relation to security or the shares. तो उसमें सही क्या है? सिर्फ पहला स्टेटमेंट सही है. They are referred to as a P note, the financial instrument required by the investors or the hedge funds to invest in the Indian securities without having to register with the Securities and Exchange Board of India. They are among the group of investment considered to be the offshore derivative investment. The investor in the PN does not own the underlying Indian security which is held by the FI who issues the PN. Thus, the investors in the PN derive the economic benefit of investing in the security without actually holding it. They benefit from the fluctuation in the price of the underlying security since the value of the PN is linked with the value of the underlying Indian security. The PN holder also does not enjoy any voting right in relation to security or shares referenced by the PN. Under the balance of the payment, कैपिटल अकाउंट में क्या क्या आता है? कैपिटल अकाउंट में देखो पोर्टफोलियो आता है इन्वेस्टमेंट, ठीक है, एक्सटर्नल कमर्शियल बोरोइंग्स आती हैं, मल्टीलैटरल बायलैटरल लोन्स आते हैं, रेमिटेंसेस नहीं आते हैं ना. The balance of payment record the transaction and the goods and services and assets between the residents of a country with the rest of the world for a specified time period, typically a year. And there are two main accounts in the BOP, the current account and the capital account. The capital account records all the international transactions of the asset. An asset is any one of the form in which the wealth can be held, for example, money, stock, bond, government debt, etc. The purchase of the asset is a debit item on the capital account. If an Indian buys a UK car company, it enters capital account transaction as a debit item, as the foreign exchange is flowing out of India. On the other hand, the sale of the asset, like the sale of the share of an Indian company to a US customer, is a credit item on the capital account. The capital account is used to finance the deficit in the current account or absorb the surplus of the current account. Components क्या हैं देखो, कैपिटल अकाउंट है, उसमें इन्वेस्टमेंट आता है, एक्सटर्नल बोरोइंग और एक्सटर्नल असिस्टेंस. इन्वेस्टमेंट में डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट जैसे FDI, equity capital, reinvested in earnings and other direct capital flow. और फिर क्या आता है इन्वेस्टमेंट में, पोर्टफोलियो इन्वेस्टमेंट, जिसमें FII, ऑफशोर फंड, ठीक है, एक्सटर्नल बोरोइंग, एग्जांपल एक्सटर्नल कमर्शियल बोरोइंग, शॉर्ट टर्म डेट। फिर आता है एक्सटर्नल असिस्टेंस, एग्जांपल गवर्नमेंट एड, इंटर गवर्नमेंटल, मल्टीलैटरल, बायलैटरल लोन। कंपोनेंट्स क्या है करंट अकाउंट के, देखो ट्रेड इन द गुड्स, ट्रेड इन द सर्विसेज एंड द ट्रांसफर पेमेंट। द ट्रेड इन गुड्स में एक्सपोर्ट ऑफ द गुड्स, इम्पोर्ट्स ऑफ द गुड्स, और ट्रेड इन सर्विसेज में नेट फैक्टर इनकम, द नेट नॉन फैक्टर इनकम, एंड द ट्रांसफर पेमेंट में कंसिस्ट ऑफ द गिफ्ट, रेमिटेंसेज एंड ग्रांट। नेट फैक्टर इनकम में नेट इनकम फ्रॉम द कॉम्पनसेशन ऑफ एम्प्लॉयज, द नेट इन्वेस्टमेंट इनकम, और नेट नॉन फैक्टर इनकम में शिपिंग, बैंकिंग, इंश्योरेंस, टूरिज्म, सॉफ्टवेयर सर्विसेज। Consider following statement regarding economic census in India. Economic census count all the entrepreneurial units in the country which are involved in any economic activities of either agriculture or non-agriculture sector. The first economic census in India was conducted along with the first decennial census of India. It is conducted by the Ministry of Statistics and the program implementation. तो इसमें सही क्या है, पहला और तीसरा। इकोनॉमिक सेंसस काउंट ऑल द एंटरप्रेन्योर यूनिट्स, ये सही है, और मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ स्टैट प्रोग्राम इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, ये सही है। Economic census launched in 1976 as a planned scheme coverage all the entrepreneurial units in the country that are involved in any economic activity of either agriculture or the non-agriculture sector which are engaged in the production or distribution of the goods or services not for the sole purpose of own consumption. Objective provides the detailed information on the operation and the other characteristics like the number of establishment, number of the person employed, source of finance and the type of ownership. Significance information used for micro level decentralized planning and to assess the contribution of various sectors of the economy in the gross domestic period. The latest 7th economic census 2019 was conducted by MOSPI to provide the disaggregated information on the various operational and the structural aspects of all the establishment in the country. The Fiscal Responsibility and the Budget Management Act is concerned with both fiscal deficit and revenue deficit. FRBM Act aims to introduce transparency in the Indian fiscal management system. The Act long-term objective for India is to achieve fiscal stability, give the Reserve Bank of India flexibility to deal with inflation in India. The FRBM Act was enacted to introduce more equitable distribution of India's debt over the years. Key features क्या है? Mandatory for the government to place the following along with the Union Budget document in Parliament annually: the medium-term fiscal policy statement, macroeconomic framework statement, fiscal policy strategy statement. The FRBM Act proposed that the revenue deficit and fiscal deficit, tax revenue, and the total outstanding liabilities be projected as a percentage of the GDP in the medium-term fiscal policy statement. फिर FRBM के exemptions क्या है? On the ground of national security, calamity, etc., the said targets of the fiscal deficit and revenue could be exceeded. Art and culture. Consider the following pairs of the martial art and the associated state. देखो इसमें 3 और 4 सही है। सिलम्बाम का तमिलनाडु, मर्दानी खेल महाराष्ट्र. This is right. Originally from Maharashtra, Mardani Khel is a weapon-based martial art form owes development to geographic condition of the state, hills, caves and valley. A very ancient form of art saw the emergence during the Maratha dynasty. Closely linked to Kerala, Kalari Patayu, Silambam is the ancient stick martial art of Tamil Nadu. Gatka, style of fighting with a wooden stake originated in Punjab in the 15th century. The Bana and the Chola are worn for the ritualistic performance, but when performed as a sport, the practitioner wear the track pants and the t-shirt, and the stick is no longer the size of a man. Thang La, Thang Ta is a Manipuri art form, combined ritual, demonstration, combat, and involve a variety of dance form in the warrior drill. The Uttara Merur inscription provide information mainly about the admin of Cholas. The Cholaola administration. Most important is local administration at the district, town and village level. Uttara Nehru inscriptions speak much about the Chola admin. Village autonomy very unique feature. Nadu was one of the important admin union of Chola. Nadu had representative assembly. The head of Nadu were called the Nattars. The council of Nada was called Nattavai. Which of the following animal have been found on the Pashupati seal? देखो elephant, tiger, rhino and antelopes. ठीक है. The most remarkable seal is the one which is depicted with the figure in the center and the animals around. This seal is generally identified as a Pashupati seal by some scholars, whereas some identify as a female deity. The seal depicts a human figure seated cross-legged, an elephant and tiger depicted to the right side of the seated figure, while on the left we have rhinoceros and buffalo. In addition to these animals, two antelopes are shown below the seat. Latest to the earliest टेम्पल आर्किटेक्चर. देखो सबसे पहले सन टेम्पल एंड कोणार्क. ठीक है. फिर उसके बाद बना था बृहदेश्वरा टेम्पल. फिर उसके बाद कैलाश टेम्पल. फिर आखिरी में लटकान टेम्पल. The Great Temple, the grandest achievement of the artistic and architectural genius of Odisha, is a sun temple at Konark, constructed by the eastern Ganga ruler Narasimha Varmana 1250 AD. The Brihadeshwara temple, erected around 1000 AD, contemporary of Raja Rani temple of Bhubaneswar. The famous Kailash temple at Ellora is a class by itself, rock-cut temple complex. Many respect the warriors Ratha at Mahabalipuram. Constructed during the reign of the Rashtrakuta king Krishna, belonged to middle of 8th century AD. The Lantkan temple of Aihole belonged to about 5th century AD. Here the architect has tried to give attention to the circumambulation path enclosed by the means of a wall, allowing the devotees to have the pradakshina or the circumambulatory of the Holy of the Holies. Consider following statement regarding the Pavaran ceremony in the ancient Indian Buddhist memories. It is a ceremony of initiation of the new followers in the Buddhist Sangha. The monks confess the offences committed during their stay in the monasteries during the rainy season. इसमें सही क्या है? दूसरा, the Pavarana is a Buddhist holy day which is celebrated on the full moon of the 11th lunar month, mark the end of the month of the Vasa called the Buddhist Lent. This day marks the end of the rainy season in some Asian country like Thailand, where Theravada Buddhism is practiced. On this day, each monk must come before the community of the monks and atone for an offense he may have committed during the Vasa. Consider the following statement regarding Kathakali dance. The Chakyar Kuthu, Kudiyatam, Krishnaatam, Ramanatam, few ritual performing acts that had a direct influence of the Kathakali. It is a blend of the dance, music and acting and dramatizes tone which are adopted from the Indian epics. They derive the textual sanction from the Balarama Bharatam and the Hastalakshana Deepika. उसमें सही क्या है? तीनों ही सही है. Kathakali dance is a home of several traditional dance and dance forms, the most notable being the Kathakali. As a dance popular today comparatively recent origin, it is an art which evolved many social, religious, theatrical forms that existed in the southern region in the ancient times. The Chakya Kuthu, Kudiyatam, Krishnaatam, Ramanatham are few of the rituals performing arts of Kerala that had a direct influence on Kathakali in the form and technique. Kathakali is a blend of the dance, music and acting and dramatizes stories that are mostly adapted from the Indian epics. It is a stylized art form, the four aspects of Abhinaya, Angika, Acharya, Vachika, Satvika, and the Nritya Nitta Natya. The dancer expresses himself through the codified Hasta Mudra facial expression closely following the verses Padam and the Sank. Kathakali derived the textual sanction from the Balarama Bharatam and Hastalakshana Deepika. Consider the following pair of the theatre forms and the region they are performed. तो उसमें करेक्ट क्या है? ए 3 एंड 4. नौटंकी उत्तर प्रदेश की, भायोना असम. Bhavai is a traditional theatre form of the Gujarat. The centers of this form are Kuch and Kathiawar. The instruments used in Bhavai are bungal, tabla, flute, pakhavaj, rabab, sarangi, manjira. In the Bhavai, there is a rare synthesis of devotion and romantic sentiment. March is a traditional theatre form of MP. It is used for the stage itself and also for the play. In this theatre form, songs are given prominence in between the dialogue. The term for dialogue in this form is the bool, and the rhyme and narration is termed bana. The tunes of this theatre form are known as rangat. Nautanki is associated with UP. The most popular center of this traditional theatre form are Kanpur, Lucknow, Hathras. The meters which are used in the verses are doha, chobola, chapai, bahari, tabir. There was a time only when the men acted in the Nautanki, but nowadays women have also started taking part in the performance. Gulab Bai of Kanpur. Bhairona is a presentation of the Ankai Nat of Assam. The glens of Assam, Bengal, Odisha, Mathura, Vrindavan can be seen. The Sutradhar narrator began from the story first in Sanskrit and then in either Braj Boli or the Assamese. Consider following statement regarding puppetry. The earliest, the earliest reference to the art of puppetry is found in the Tamil classic Sila Padikaram. Natya Shastra, the masterly treatise on the dramaturgy, also refer exclusively about the art of puppetry. इसमें सही क्या है सिर्फ पहला सही है. The earliest reference of the art of puppetry is found in the Tamil classic Sila Papadikaram, written around the 1st or 2nd century BC. Natya Shastra, the masterly treatise on the dramaturgy, written sometime during 2nd century to 2nd century AD, does not refer to the art of puppetry, but the producer cum director of the human theatre has been termed as Sutradhar, meaning the holder of the strings. The word might have been found its place in theatre terminology long before Natya Shastra has written, but it must come from the Marionette theatre. Puppetry, therefore, must have originated in India more than 500 years before the Christ. Consider the following statement regarding Buddhist and the Jain literature. The Buddhist canonical literature was written in the Pali language. Both Buddhism and Jainism have refrained from using Sanskrit in any form. इसमें गलत क्या है? दूसरा गलत है. Pali Prakrit spoken language of Indians after the Vedic period. Lord Buddha used Pali to give his sermon. The Buddhist canonical literature is in Pali, which includes Tripitaka, threefold basket. The Buddhist literature is also abundantly in Sanskrit, include the great epic Buddha Charita by Ashwagosha. Jain literature is available in Sanskrit too, like Upamiti Bhava, Prapancha Katha of Siddharasi. With reference to history of philosophical thought in India, consider following statement regarding Samakya school. Believe in the existence of the God and accept the theory of rebirth or the transmigration of soul. The Samakya holds that it is a self-knowledge that leads to liberation and not any exterior influence or agent. So correct concept B. The Samakya school denies the existence of God. However, rebirth and transmigration of the soul are inherent in the Samakya school. The liberation results from the disappearance of the limitation of the self-awareness. Consider following statement regarding the exotic species. Exotic live species are the animal or the plant species that moved from the original range to a new one. According to the newly issued advisory by the Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change, exotic live species include the species from the schedule of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Lantana camara, water hyacinth, pantheon are some of exotic which are in India. तो इसमें पहला और तीसरा सही है, दूसरा गलत है. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change issued an advisory saying people importing exotic live species will have to make a voluntary disclosure. The advisory issue defines exotic live species as animal or the plant species moved from the original range to a new one. Several exotic species of the birds, reptiles, small mammals, fishes, and even some plants are imported. The ministry has said exotic live species shall be constructed to name only the animals named under the Appendix 1, 2, 3 of Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species Sites of the Wild Fauna and Flora and does not include the species from the schedules of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Lantana, Camara, water hyacinth and parthenium are some of the exotic species that are introduced in India. Consider following statement regarding the species covered by the Convention on the International Trade in the Endangered Species of the Wild Fauna and the Flora sites that are listed in the three appendices. One में क्या है? It includes the species threatened with the extension and trade in specimens of these species are completely prohibited. Two में includes species not necessarily threatened with extinction but trade can happen with prior permission. Three में include species that are listed after one member country has asked other side parties for assisting in controlling trade. तो इसमें दूसरा और तीसरा सही है, पहला गलत है. Sites work by subjecting international trade in the specimens of the selected species to certain control. One include species threatened with extinction. The trade in the specimen of the species is permitted only in exceptional circumstances. Two may include species that are not necessarily threatened with extinction but in which trade must be controlled in order to avoid utilization incompatible with the survival. This appendix contains the species which are protected in at least one country which has asked other side parties for assistance in controlling the trade. Which of the following are the reporting programs by the World Wildlife Fund? चारों रिपोर्ट है. लिविंग प्लैनेट रिपोर्ट, अर्थ आर, डेप्थ फॉर नेचर स्वैप, मरीन स्टीवर्डशिप काउंसिल. ठीक है. द लिविंग प्लैनेट रिपोर्ट इज पब्लिश्ड every 2 years by WWF since 1998 based on a living planet index and ecological footprint calculation. In addition, WWF has launched several notable wildlife campaigns, including Earth Hour and the Depth for Nature Swap, and its current work is organized around these six areas: the food, climate, freshwater, wildlife, forest, and ocean. Other programs or campaigns include Healthy Ground, Marine Stewardship Council. The Marine Stewardship Council, independent non-profit organization that set the standard for sustainable fishing. Healthy Grown Potato, eco brand that provide high quality, sustainability grown, packaged, and shipped potato to consumer, leveraging integrated pest management farming practices on the large scale farms. UNEP Colombo Declaration is related to Global Nitrogen Challenge. The UNEP member states adopted the Colombo Declaration that calls for tackling the global nitrogen challenge. It has been developed with the technical support of the International Nitrogen Management System, a joint activity of the UNEP and the International Nitrogen Initiative supported by the Global Environmental Facility. The aim is to have nitrogen waste by the 2030. Half. Which of the following is a national park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and a Ramsar Site in India? The correct option is B, 1 and 3. सुंदरबन एंड क्यू लेड्यू है ना. क्यू लेड्यू नेशनल पार्क जो है वो राजस्थान में है ना. फिर which of the following categories have been covered under various schedule of the Indian Wildlife Protection Act 1972? चारों. Fishes, reptile, insect, bird. A number of wild animal bird species have been listed in the various schedule of the Indian Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Similarly, these species are also categorized under IUCN Red List sites and Convention on the Migratory Species. These are insect, reptile, fish, bird, mammal. Consider following statement regarding the criteria for the biodiversity hotspot. It must contain at least 15,000 species of the vascular plant, more than 0.5% of the world total as endemic. It has to have lost at least 70% of the original habitat. मतलब दूसरा ठीक है. A biodiversity hotspot is a region with a high amount of biodiversity that experiences habitat loss by the human activity. In order to qualify as a biodiversity hotspot according to Conservation International, a region must contain at least 1,500 species of vascular plants, more than 5% of the world total as endemic. It has to have lost at least 70% of the original habitat. Consider following statement. None of the biodiversity hotspots in the world exceed the species count set to qualify as a biodiversity hotspot. Anthropocene denotes the present geological time interval that is used to describe humanity's large impact on the environment. इसमें दूसरा सही है. Anthropocene denote the present geological time interval used to describe humanity's large impact on environment. Many of the biodiversity hotspots exceeded the two criteria: the Sundaland hotspot in the Southeast Asia and the tropical Andes hotspot in South America. 15,000 endemic plant species. The loss of the vegetation in some hotspots has reached a startling 95%. Coined by the Paul Crutzen and the Eugen Stormer in 2000 to denote the present geological time interval, Anthropocene has been used to describe humanity's large impact on the environment. Consider following statement regarding Gore, also called the Indian bison. It is the largest extant bovine in the world, mainly present in the dryland ecosystem, and they are native to the South and Southeast Asia. तो उसमें सही क्या है? पहला और तीसरा. The Goros, also called the Indian bison, have not only returned to the Bihar Valmiki Tiger Reserve but also breeding there due to increase in grassland cover. It is the largest extant bovine in the world. They are grassland specialists and their main food is grass, native to South and Southeast Asia. Distribution. In India, the population was estimated to be 12,000 to 20,000 22 in the mid 1990s. In the Western Ghats and the outflanking hill in the southern India constitute one of the most extensive extant stronghold of Gaur, in particular in the Vayanad, Nagarhole and Madhumalai Bandipur complex. The biodecomposers can digest which of the following in the paddy straw: the cellulose, lignin and pectin. तीनों सही है. Pusa decomposer is a mix of 7 fungi that produce enzyme to digest the cellulose, lignin and the pectin in a paddy straw. The fungi thrive at 30 to 32 degrees Celsius, which is the temperature prevailing when the paddy is harvested and the wheat is sown. That's all.